So to many people's surprise, including my own, at the most recent Nintendo Direct, we got a major Nintendo Switch Online update portion of the event confirming the new Game Boy and Game Boy Color, as well as Game Boy Advance systems being added to the platforms, with the surprise addition that these things were shadow dropped. And in today's video, I want to boot up these consoles together, discuss all of the enhancements and options that are available for them, and break down and discuss where we should be setting our expectations when it comes to new game additions for both Nintendo Switch Online and Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack going forward. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. And as I mentioned, guys, today we are taking a look at the brand new two different consoles, one added into the base tier being the Game Boy, and one being added into the expansion pass being, or expansion pack rather, there's so many expansion passes or packs with Nintendo, the Game Boy Advance. And we're going to take a fresh look at both of these consoles right now. We will hop into Game Boy Advance first. This is my first time checking it out. By the way, side note, it is insane to me that I have three icons that I've been longing for a long time, being Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, and also Metroid Prime Remaster, which we will be discussing that in a future video. Right out of the gate, look at these launch games: Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Zelda the Minish Cap, one of the best 2D Zeldas period, Super Mario Bros. 3, but it's Super Mario Advance 4. Why they did the different numbers on that, I'll never quite understand. Mario Kart Super Circuit with online play intact, mind you. Then you also have WarioWare Inc. and this game that I won't even fully attempt to pronounce the name for, but basically these came out of nowhere. They're shadow dropped right after the Direct. I'm going to also hop into Game Boy and we're going to play a little bit of each of them, but then also discuss what this really means now for Nintendo Switch Online game updates, because it's actually a pretty big deal that we are still actively going to be able to expect one new N64 game loosely to be added per month. I expect Nintendo to get basically less reliable with that update schedule, but in addition to that, we have all of these incredible Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games to play, and then that's going to get updated as well. So it really shifts the conversation. And as much as I want to hop into Minish Cap, it does have a little bit of a lengthy startup before you get to play anything. Wario Land 3, Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Let's hop into a Game Boy game first to look at this, because I do actually want to take a look at the overlays that they mentioned, where you can actually change it to Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket. So let's see how we can figure out how to do that. We'll give it just a moment. Okay, so I did actually miss a step in the beginning. You have to configure this right out of the gate. So that's a nice little tip right there. So if you're looking for the options in the menus, wow, and we have additional options here that I didn't even realize. Reproduce classic feel. So that, I guess, really kind of blurs the screen, it looks like, and then display with small screen, so you can even make the screen smaller if you wanted to. Now, Nintendo, if you could go in and actually enable, you know, kind of this exact option, but with eliminating the black bars on the side, then we'd really be talking. I am going to enable Game Boy Color for all of the games. We will hop back into Samus Returns, and now you can see essentially the same boot up, the same process as we saw before, but in color. And so I think that that's genius. It's definitely smart that Nintendo is enabling basically these games to be preserved in a great way, but also exactly how you remember playing them, whether that be on the original Game Boy, the Pocket that I don't think near as many people had, or the Game Boy Color. You have all those options intact, and I just think that that is so cool that they're able to do that. And I also would love to see them continue to add support for additional customization in the future, because you guys might remember, I grew up with the Game Boy player in the GameCube, and that's actually how I experienced a lot of Game Boy games for the first time, because I've just never been the biggest handheld gamer out there. For whatever reason, I've always strongly preferred to play on a TV. And so when it came to when it came to playing games on the go or on a TV, I'd always choose the TV. But on Game Boy Player, you had a lot of options with filters and things, and you had a lot of options with the ability to change the sidebars and to different styles. And on the Switch today, we just have these, you know, black bars on the side with the little polka dot type overlay, I guess you would call it. So anyway, this game, oh gosh, Metroid Samus Returns is a ton of fun. Still definitely a better way to play this on the 3DS with the remake, but I would just say that this is one that you should go through, play Metroid 1, then this, then go through and play Super Metroid, and then Fusion and Dread, and you will be fully caught up on the 5 2D Metroid story arc. It's such a cool story that they tell all throughout, and each game is fantastic. So I'm going to have a lot of fun playing through this game. We know of a lot more to come on the way in addition to the ones that aren't here today, which I will also be covering in a little bit later in the video. But for now, we will hop over to Game Boy Advance and briefly check out how that one plays. So we now have yet another way to play classic Mario Kart games that you wouldn't have access to otherwise with the Game Boy Advance, being Mario Kart Super Circuit. And I just think it's incredible that we are talking about playing these games with online play enabled with friends in 2023. And what's interesting in terms of the future of NSO and the update history now is that we won't really know what to expect, because you guys probably know if you've watched previous videos, I was always of the mindset that Nintendo kind of viewed the September Direct as their showcase for big NSO editions, and they broke the trend with that now, because in light of the February Direct revealing such major additions to the service like Game Boy Advance and Game Boy / Game Boy Color, which is really kind of the same thing, and they even built it in the same app, which I think makes a ton of sense since it was technically the same system. One just had color, a little bit more powerful, of course, as well. But all that said, you know, I think now it comes into play whenever the next NSO update happens. It could just be at any point in time, and it might just be, you know, game roadmap updates for a while. I definitely expect to see kind of more of a diverse support now that we could get potentially 1 month we'll get new Game Boy Advance games, then the other month we'll get new Game Boy games, then we'll get the new N64 game. They're kind of going to be in a scenario now with game updates where they could just update one instead of all of the systems, or one or the other, and kind of alternate instead of having to do like one N64 game every month. I also noticed at the September Direct that word gradually, that they would be gradually adding in new games to the N64 service, and it made me kind of think that maybe Nintendo's not going to stick to the one per month. And we've already seen them do away from that, sometimes dropping 2 games in a month, other times doing skipping in a month entirely. We've seen that happen a couple times now. So it is something that we're kind of more in uncharted territories now, but across the board, this is a fantastic update, a great addition to the service, and these are playable today, right now. Now, in terms of the other games that are not on the service yet, but that will be making it to the service, you have Metroid Fusion, Fire Emblem, Golden Sun, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and Kirby and the Amazing Mirror for the Game Boy Advance games. We'll just go ahead and take the L on this one, but you then have for Game Boy Color titles, Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and Seasons, huge games, Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, and Pokemon Trading Card Game already announced for the roadmap. So that's a big deal in and of itself, and it's nice to see Nintendo kind of building up the hype with these games the same way that they did with N64 games, where we get that little brief glimpse of here's what's around the corner, here's what'll be added in the future, and then in the meantime you have this initial library of games to go through. I would expect another probably month or two before we really see anything in terms of new game additions to these Game Boy family of consoles, but I hope that the Oracle games hit sooner rather than later, because those are ones that there's not an easy modern way to play those. I loved Link's Awakening and replaying it on the Switch remake version, but Oracle, I think for me, both Oracle of Ages and Seasons, I would rank above Link's Awakening personally, and then Minish Cap is kind of in that top echelon of 2D Zelda games for me as well. So there's so much fun stuff to play now, so many brand new titles, similar customization options on Game Boy Advance in the settings menu. If you do go in there, you can enable black bars. You can kind of change the style to be more true to its original form, I guess, because clearly if you know, you see sharp edges and it's highly pixelated, but it's kind of higher resolution. So some people may like the old, more smooth, I guess you could say kind of downgraded in a way, but also not, because it's smoothing out the image, kind of making it look like it's running at a little bit of a lower resolution like it was back in the day. So the additional options for gameplay and remembering the games how you want to remember them and play them how you remember them, I think is a huge win. And it also sets an interesting precedent that, like we've seen Nintendo continue to update the N64 online emulator over the course of time, I think we could also see them do stuff to N64, Sega Sega Genesis, even NES and SNES, where more quality of life features to make the games more true to themselves and just have additional options may be a thing. And if we're extremely lucky, maybe one day we do get the ability to do native widescreen, similar to how GoldenEye has, or at the very least do the stretch image, just because, well, it's easier to do that clearly, and you would at least have the option to replay some of these games. But at this point in the video, guys, I really want to hear from you all personally. How are you feeling about the fact that we got these new NSO systems added in today? We do also have an updated online app that we will quickly go over while we're closing out the video here. But the update to the online is it's just all of these systems are now consolidated on the screen where you go to NES, Super NES, and Game Boy. You can now scroll through all of those games and see them in release order. It's just a really cool time. I know not everybody is a fan of subscription services. I definitely am not in some aspects, but I do think that big updates like this are really exciting to see, and I am just hopeful that Nintendo builds upon this foundation for Nintendo Switch Online to what is next in terms of the next-gen Nintendo Switch. And could we be talking about GameCube games making it over to the service in the near future? Probably on the next console if I'm a betting man, but that's really where I want to hear from you guys. What consoles do you want next? Which games do you want next from the Game Boy family of systems and N64 that is still ongoing? Do you think we get any SNES or SNES support, or is NES or SNES support, or is that done? And then what is, do you think, the roadmap for Genesis games? Is that kind of just going to be sporadic from here on out? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around this topic. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.